At 2:15 p.m., the sky caught fire. I watched my entire city turn into ash in 10 seconds. This is how the world ended. It's strange what the mind chooses to hold on to. 70 years have passed since the sky burned. I have seen empires fall. I have seen men eat their own leather boots to survive the winter. I have seen cities swallowed by the jungle. But none of that is as clear to me as the taste of that cold coffee. It was 2:12 p.m. A Tuesday. I was sitting at my desk on the 14th floor. The air conditioner was humming that annoying, rattling sound. I was worried about a deadline. I was worried about my rent. I was worried about the argument I had with my sister the night before. We fought over something stupid. I think it was about money. I didn't call her back. I thought I had time. We always think we have time. The city outside the window looked permanent. The steel, the glass, the traffic crawling on the highway below, it looked like it would last forever. We were arrogant. We thought we were the masters of the world. The end didn't start with an explosion. It started with a sound. At 2:14 p.m., every phone in the office buzzed at the exact same second. It wasn't a ringtone. It was that harsh, jarring vibration of the emergency alert system. The room went silent. The typing stopped. The laughter died. I looked at my screen. The background was red. The letters were white capital blocks. Ballistic missile threat inbound. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. I remember laughing. A nervous, dry chuckle. The system is hacked, someone said near the water cooler. Some kid in a basement is playing a prank. We didn't move. We just stared at each other. The human brain refuses to accept its own extinction. It's a defense mechanism. We looked out the window. The sun was shining. The birds were flying. There was no missile. Then the siren started. If you have never heard a real air raid siren, pray you never do. It is not like the movies. It is a sound that bypasses your ears and vibrates in your teeth. It rises from the ground, a mechanical scream that triggers a primal instinct in your DNA. Run. Hide. Survive. I stood up. My legs felt like they were filled with lead. I grabbed my wallet. I don't know why. Maybe because my sister's photo was in it. I walked to the window. The traffic below had stopped. People were getting out of their cars. They were looking up. And then the world ended. It wasn't a missile. I never saw a missile. I saw a light. It appeared in the center of the downtown district, 5 miles away. A sphere of pure, absolute white. It was brighter than the sun. It was brighter than anything God ever created. It didn't just illuminate the room. It erased the shadows. It erased the color. For a split second, I could see the bones in my own hand as I raised it to cover my eyes. I didn't hear a bang. Physics is a cruel teacher. Light travels faster than sound. I remembered one thing from a documentary I watched years ago. If you see the flash, you have seconds before the shockwave. Get down. I screamed. I think I screamed. I couldn't hear my own voice. I threw myself behind the heavy industrial photocopier. I curled into a ball. I opened my mouth to equalize the pressure. I squeezed my eyes shut. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. Then the hammer of God came down. The sound was not a noise. It was a physical blow. The windows didn't just break. They vaporized. The air pressure in the room dropped instantly, sucking the oxygen out of my lungs. Then the blast wave hit the building. I felt the floor heave, like a ship on a storm-tossed ocean. The ceiling tiles rained down. Steel groaned. Concrete cracked. I was tossed against the wall like a rag doll. Then came the darkness. I don't know how long I was out. It could have been minutes. It could have been an hour. I woke up because I couldn't breathe. The air was thick, heavy, and tasted like copper. It tasted like old blood and pulverized drywall. I tried to move, but my arm was pinned. Panic set in. I yanked my arm free, tearing the sleeve of my shirt. I sat up. The office was gone. The cubicles were flattened. The ceiling was a web of hanging wires and twisted metal. The panoramic window, the one that looked out over the city, was just a jagged hole. And the silence. That was the worst part. The city noise, the traffic, the sirens. Everything was gone. There was only a high-pitched ringing in my ears. Eek! I coughed, spitting out gray dust. I stood up, stumbling over debris. My shoes crunched on glass. Hello. I croaked. Is anyone there? No answer. Just the settling of the dust. I walked to the edge of the shattered window. I had to know. I had to see. I looked out. My city was gone. In its place was a sea of fire. The skyscrapers were skeletons, stripped of their glass, burning like giant torches against a purple bruised sky. A massive mushroom cloud, black and red, was climbing into the atmosphere, miles high, blotting out the sun. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. I looked down at my watch. The glass was cracked, but the second hand was still ticking. 2:28 p.m. 16 minutes. That's all it took to destroy civilization. 16 minutes to turn the modern world into hell. I checked my pockets. My phone was shattered, the screen a spiderweb of cracks. Dead. No signal. No internet. No way to call my sister. I'm sorry, I whispered to the burning city. I'm sorry I didn't call. But the city didn't care. The fire didn't care. I turned around. I had to get out. The building was groaning, the steel beams warping from the heat. The fire was climbing the tower. I wasn't an engineer anymore. I wasn't an employee. I was a rat in a burning cage. I found the stairwell door. It was jammed. I kicked it. Once. Twice. It gave way with a screech of metal. The stairwell was dark, lit only by the emergency red lights that were flickering and dying. The air was getting hotter. I started to run down. 14th floor. 13th floor. On the 12th floor I saw the first body. It was a man in a suit. He was sitting on the steps looking peaceful, except for the glass shard in his neck. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. 10th floor. 9th floor. The smoke was getting thicker. I took off my tie and wrapped it around my mouth. It didn't help much. By the time I reached the lobby, my lungs were burning. The revolving doors were gone, blown out into the street. I stepped out onto the sidewalk. The heat hit me first. It was like opening an oven door. The asphalt was soft, melting under my feet. Cars were overturned, some still burning. And the people. I won't describe them. Not yet. You are not ready for that. I looked up at the sky. It was beginning to rain. But it wasn't water. It was black, oily and heavy. Fallout. I remembered the rules. Get underground. Stay away from windows. Don't touch the rain. I saw a subway station entrance across the street. The sign was melted, but the stairs went down. Down into the dark. Down into the belly of the earth. I took one last look at the burning sky. I took a deep breath of the poisoned air. And I ran for the subway. My 24 hours in the blast zone had just begun. The subway station entrance was like a throat swallowing us whole. I tumbled down the concrete stairs, my shoulder slamming against the tiled wall. The air here was different. Above, it had been hot, searing, smelling of ozone and sulfur. Down here it was stale. It smelled of old sweat, urine, and that distinct metallic scent of high-voltage electricity. And fear. You can smell fear. It smells sour. I wasn't the only one running. Shadows lunged out of the smoke, throwing themselves down the stairs. Men in torn suits, women clutching their shoes in their hands, tourists still holding their cameras like useless talismans. We reached the turnstiles. There was no electricity. The gates were locked. Panic is a contagious disease. It spreads faster than a virus. The man in front of me, a large guy in a delivery uniform, didn't even slow down. He rammed into the metal gate, screaming something incoherent. He bounced off. Then he tried again. And again. Jump it. I yelled, my voice raspy and foreign to my own ears. I vaulted over the turnstile. My foot caught the metal bar, and I sprawled onto the dirty floor on the other side. I scrambled up. I had to get deeper. The radiation, the black rain, was coming. The deeper we went, the more concrete was between us and the death falling from the sky. I reached the platform, and I stopped cold. I thought I was one of the lucky few. I was wrong. The platform was packed. There were hundreds of them, maybe 1,000. A sea of bodies pressed together in the flickering orange glow of the emergency lights. They were huddled against the walls, sitting on the benches, lying on the floor. It was the silence that terrified me. You expect screaming in a disaster. You expect chaos. But in the first hour, there is only shock. People were staring at nothing. A woman was calmly applying lipstick over and over again, even though her face was covered in gray dust. A businessman was tapping furiously on his phone, muttering, "Send. Just send. Send." I pushed my way through the crowd. "Make room," I shouted. "We need to move away from the entrance." No one looked at me. They were ghosts. Then I saw the burns. A teenage girl was sitting near a vending machine. She was wearing a white summer dress, but the side of the dress facing the stairs, the side that had faced the blast, was gone. The pattern of the floral print was burned into her skin. Flash burns. Thermal radiation. I turned away, my stomach heaving. I forced myself to think like an engineer. Structural integrity. Ventilation. Water. The tunnel. I looked at the tracks. A train was stalled halfway out of the station. Its doors pried open. It was dark inside, a steel coffin. Suddenly the ground jumped. It wasn't the blast this time. It was an aftershock. The entire station groaned. Dust rained down from the arched ceiling. That broke the trance. The silence shattered. 1,000 voices screamed at once. People surged forward, away from the stairs, pushing, clawing, trampling. "The ceiling is collapsing," someone shrieked. I was shoved against a concrete pillar. An elbow caught me in the ribs. I couldn't breathe. I was drowning in a sea of limbs and fabric. "Stop!" I roared, but my voice was lost in the din. Then the lights went out. The emergency generator failed. The orange glow vanished. We were plunged into absolute, suffocating pitch black. The screaming intensified. It was primal. The sound of animals trapped in a pit. I reached into my pocket. My keychain. I had a small, cheap LED light on it. A promotional gift from a bank. I clicked it on. The tiny beam of white light cut through the darkness. It was weak, but in that blackness it looked like a lighthouse. Heads turned toward me. Hundreds of eyes, reflecting the light like cats in the dark. "Listen to me," I shouted, holding the light up like a torch. "If we panic, we die." The ceiling held. "We are safe for now." "Safe?" A voice cried out from the dark. "My skin is burning. I need a doctor." "There are no doctors," I said. The cruelty of the truth was the only thing I had left. "There are no ambulances coming. The world up there is gone." "Liar." A bottle smashed somewhere in the dark. I lowered the light and pointed it toward the stairs, the way we had come in. Something was trickling down the steps. A thick black sludge. It moved slowly like oil. It dripped onto the platform floor. The black rain. "Back up," I whispered. Then I screamed it. "Back up. Don't touch the water." The crowd recoiled, pressing tighter against the tunnel walls. We watched as the black liquid pooled at the bottom of the stairs. It hissed faintly as it touched the concrete. We were trapped. The exit was blocked by radioactive fallout. The tunnel was blocked by a dead train. We were buried alive under millions of tons of rock and a burning city. I looked at my watch again. 3 p.m. 45 minutes had passed since the flash. I sat down against the pillar, switching off my tiny light to save the battery. The darkness returned, heavier than before. In the dark I heard a sound. Not screaming. Not crying. It was the sound of a wrapper crinkling. Someone, somewhere in the crowd, was opening a candy bar. My stomach twisted. I hadn't eaten since breakfast. And suddenly, I realized the new currency of this world. It wasn't money. It wasn't gold. It was calories. I put my hand over my pocket, feeling the outline of the single protein bar I had grabbed from my desk before leaving. I didn't open it. I stayed silent. The first hour was over. The war for survival had begun. Time dissolved in the dark. I checked my watch again. 7:15 p.m. 5 hours had passed since the sky burned. 5 hours since civilization ended. The subway station, which had felt like a refuge, was turning into a tomb. The ventilation fans had stopped working when the power died. Now the heat was rising. Not the heat of the fire above, but the heat of 1,000 bodies packed into a concrete tube. The air was getting heavy, wet, and sour. It smelled of unwashed bodies, fear, and vomit. That was the first sign of the invisible killer. Down by the stairs, near the puddle of black sludge, the people who had arrived last were getting sick. It wasn't a normal sickness. It was violent. I could hear them in the dark. Retching, dry heaving, spitting up fluids that smelled metallic. Acute radiation syndrome. They had absorbed a lethal dose just by running through the rain. Now, their DNA was unraveling. They were dead. Their bodies just didn't know it yet. I moved further back, pushing deeper into the tunnel, stepping over legs and bags. I used my small keychain light sparingly, just quick flashes to see where I was going. Turn that off. Someone hissed. Save the battery. Shut up. Another voice yelled. I need to see. The social contract was fraying. In the first hour, we were victims together. Now we were competitors for the same oxygen. I found a spot near a concrete pillar, away from the tracks. I sat down, pulling my knees to my chest. My throat was parched. My tongue felt like sandpaper. Thirst. It is a primal urge. You can go weeks without food. You can go days without sleep. But without water, in this heat, the madness sets in quickly. Suddenly, a beam of light cut through the darkness. Someone else had a flashlight, a big, heavy-duty tactical one. The beam swept across the platform. It illuminated faces frozen in terror. It illuminated the sick people by the stairs. Then the beam stopped. It landed on a rectangular shape against the far wall. The vending machine. It stood there silent and dark, but inside, behind the thick plexiglass, we could see them. Rows of plastic bottles. Water. Soda. Iced tea. The silence on the platform changed. It wasn't fear anymore. It was hunger. Water, a woman whispered. I saw it first. A man shouted. The spell broke. It started with a stampede. The man with the tactical flashlight ran toward the machine. But he wasn't fast enough. The large delivery driver, the one who had tried to smash the turnstiles earlier, tackled him. The flashlight spun across the floor, creating dizzying shadows on the walls. I stood up, pressing my back against the pillar. I watched. I didn't run. My engineer's brain was screaming. Energy conservation. Risk assessment. A mob formed around the machine. They were pounding on the glass with their fists. Break it. Break it open. The delivery driver grabbed a metal trash can. He roared, swinging it like a club. Crash. The plexiglass shattered. If you think humans are civilized, you have never seen them fight for water in the dark. It was a frenzy. Hands reached into the broken glass. People were pulling out bottles, dropping them, fighting over them. I heard the sound of tearing fabric. I heard the crunch of a nose breaking. That's mine. Get off me. My baby needs it. A bottle of cola rolled across the floor, stopping near my feet. I looked at it. It was warm. It was plastic. It was life. I reached down to grab it. A hand shot out of the darkness and grabbed my wrist. I looked up. In the scattered light of the fallen flashlight, I saw a man in a torn business suit. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, manic. He had lost his shoes. Give it to me, he snarled. He didn't ask. He demanded. I hesitated. I was a white-collar worker. I built spreadsheets. I designed HVAC systems. I didn't fight. He didn't wait. He punched me. His fist connected with my cheekbone. Bright lights exploded in my vision. I fell back, hitting the concrete hard. The bottle rolled away. He scrambled after it, snatching it up like a prize. He didn't even open it. He just held it to his chest and disappeared into the crowd. I lay on the floor, tasting blood in my mouth. My face throbbed. I touched my cheek. It was swelling. I looked at the mob by the vending machine. The delivery driver was chugging a bottle of water, foam spilling down his chin. Someone hit him from behind with a piece of the broken machine. He went down. I realized something then. Something that scared me more than the bomb. The bomb had destroyed the buildings. But the thirst was destroying us. We weren't people anymore. We were animals in a cage. And the biggest animals were going to eat the small ones. I needed an advantage. I crawled away from the fight. I moved toward the tracks, where the light didn't reach. I felt around on the ground. Debris. Trash. My hand touched something cold and sharp. It was a piece of metal, a bracket that had fallen from the ceiling during the aftershock. It was about 6 inches long, jagged on one end, heavy iron. I gripped it. It felt cold in my palm. It felt necessary. I didn't go back for the water. The vending machine was empty now anyway. The mob was dispersing, leaving behind groaning bodies on the floor. I sat back against my pillar. I wiped the blood from my lip. I held the piece of iron tight. I hadn't managed to get water. But I had found something else. I had found a weapon. And I knew with a terrifying certainty that before the sun rose again, I was going to have to use it. I didn't sleep. You don't sleep when you are prey. I sat in the shadows, gripping my piece of iron, watching the station decay. The psychology of the crowd was shifting again. First it was shock. Then violence. Now it was despair. The screaming had stopped. It was replaced by low sobbing and the wet, rattling coughs of the dying. The people near the stairs, the ones who had been touched by the black rain, were quiet now. I shined my tiny light over there for a split second. They weren't moving. The black sludge had pooled across the entire entrance platform. The radiation was creeping toward us, inch by inch. I checked my watch. 3:45 a.m. The air in the station was getting thin. Carbon dioxide was building up. I felt it in my temples, a dull, throbbing headache. If I stayed here, I would suffocate, or I would die of radiation poisoning. There was only one way out. I looked at the black mouth of the subway tunnel. The tracks disappeared into the dark, heading away from the city center, away from the blast zone. It was suicide to walk into a dark tunnel without a map. But staying here was a death sentence. I stood up. My legs were stiff. My face burned where I had been punched. I tightened my grip on the iron bracket and stepped off the platform, down onto the tracks. The gravel crunched loudly under my shoes. A few heads turned in my direction, but no one moved to stop me. They were too weak. I began to walk. The darkness swallowed me immediately. The faint orange glow of the station faded behind me. I was alone. I clicked on my keychain light. The beam was getting dimmer. The battery was dying. I had maybe an hour of light left. I walked for 10 minutes. The silence was absolute. Just the drip, drip, drip of water leaking from the ceiling. Then I smelled it. Smoke. And meat. Cooking meat. My stomach cramped violently. Hunger is a monster. It overrides logic. I rounded a bend in the tracks and saw a flickering light ahead. A fire. Someone had started a small fire in the middle of the tracks, burning trash and wooden railway ties. There were 3 of them. 3 men. They were crouched around the fire. I stopped, turning off my light immediately. I pressed myself against the cold, wet wall of the tunnel. I watched. They weren't cooking a rat. They were cooking cans of soup. They must have raided a bodega before running down here. I saw a backpack sitting on the ground next to the largest man. It was bulging. My mouth watered. I hadn't eaten in 18 hours. I should have turned back. I should have snuck past them. But then the large man stood up. He was holding a flashlight, a big one. The beam swung around and hit me. I froze. "Well, look what we have here," he said. His voice echoed in the tunnel. The other two men stood up. They were holding lengths of pipe. They were dirty, soot-covered, and smiling. It wasn't a friendly smile. "He's got a nice watch," one of them said. "And shoes," said the other. "My feet are killing me." I took a step back. I don't want trouble. I'm just passing through. "Nobody passes through," the big man said. He stepped over the rail. "This is a toll road. Drop the watch. Drop the shoes." I looked at the backpack of food. Then I looked at them. I knew in that moment that if I gave them my shoes, they would kill me anyway. You don't leave a witness in the dark. I gripped my iron bracket behind my back. "Okay," I said, my voice shaking. "Just take it." I bent down, pretending to unlace my shoe. The big man laughed and walked closer. He lowered his guard. He thought I was weak. He thought I was just another office worker. When he was 2 feet away, I didn't unlace my shoe. I sprang up. I swung the iron bracket with every ounce of fear and rage I had in my body. Crack. The metal hit him directly in the jaw. It was a sickening sound, like breaking a dry branch. He didn't scream. He just dropped like a stone. The flashlight rolled away. The other two men froze. They stared at their fallen leader, then at me. I stood there breathing heavily. Blood, his blood, was on my hand. I picked up the flashlight. I shined it directly in their eyes, blinding them. "Back off." I screamed. The sound terrified me. It wasn't my voice. It was the voice of a predator. They hesitated. They looked at the iron bar in my hand, dripping dark fluid. They looked at the big man, who was convulsing on the ground. Fear is a calculation. They calculated that I was crazy. We don't want trouble, man," one of them stammered. They backed away. Then they turned and ran, disappearing down the tunnel into the dark. I was alone with the fallen man. I looked down at him. He was unconscious, maybe dying. I looked at the backpack. I grabbed it. I didn't check on him. I didn't call for help. I didn't feel guilty. I opened the bag. 5 cans of soup. A bottle of water. A Swiss Army knife. And a lighter. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. Not because of the violence, but because of the water. I opened the bottle and drank. I drank until my stomach hurt. Then I took the flashlight, the backpack, and my iron bar. I left the man there in the dark. I walked deeper into the tunnel. I was no longer just a survivor. I was a killer. The old world was dead, and the new rules were simple. Him or me. I chose me. I walked until my legs went numb. I don't know how many miles I covered in the dark. The tunnel was endless, a concrete throat stretching into the earth. Every shadow looked like an attacker. Every dripping pipe sounded like footsteps. I held the flashlight in my left hand and the iron bar in my right. I didn't turn the light off anymore. I didn't care about the battery. I cared about seeing the monsters before they saw me. The adrenaline from the fight began to fade, replaced by a cold, shivering exhaustion. My body was remembering the pain. My ribs ached where I had been slammed into the pillar. My face throbbed. My knuckles were bruised from the impact of the iron against bone. I wasn't a hero. I was a man who had bashed another man's skull in for a can of soup. I stopped at a junction. To the left, the tracks continued toward the suburbs. To the right, there was a heavy steel door marked "Maintenance Only." Authorized personnel. I tried the handle. Locked. I shined the light on the lock. It was an old, rusty padlock. I raised my iron bar. I didn't have the energy for finesse. I struck the lock. Once. Twice. Sparks flew in the dark. On the third strike, the hasp snapped. I pulled the heavy door open and slipped inside, closing it quickly behind me. I shoved a heavy metal shelf against it to barricade the door. Finally, I swept the room with my light. It was a small maintenance closet. A dusty desk, a chair, a locker, and a slop sink. I went to the sink and turned the handle. A rusty groan, a spit of air, and then nothing. The water pressure was gone. The city's heart had stopped beating. I slumped into the chair. It squeaked under my weight. I put the flashlight on the desk, aiming it at the ceiling to create a dim, ambient light. I opened the backpack. I laid out my treasures. 5 cans of chicken noodle soup. 1 half-empty bottle of water. A lighter. A Swiss Army knife. And the flashlight. This was my net worth. Yesterday, I had a savings account, a credit score, and a retirement plan. Today, I was rich because I had soup. I took the knife and sawed open one of the cans. I didn't heat it. I drank it cold, straight from the jagged metal rim. It was salty, slimy, and absolutely delicious. I licked the inside of the can until my tongue bled. Then I took out my wallet. I pulled out the photo of my sister. She was smiling, standing on a beach in Florida. The sun was bright in the photo. I made it. I whispered to the picture. I'm safe. But I knew it was a lie. I wasn't safe. I was just alive. There is a difference. I looked at my watch. 2:15 p.m. Wednesday. Exactly 24 hours had passed since the phones buzzed. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. I tried to sleep, but my mind was replaying the last day on a loop. The flash. The office collapsing. The screams in the station. The sound of the iron bar hitting the man's jaw. Crack. I looked at my hands. They were covered in gray dust and dried blood. I wasn't the same man who had walked into the office yesterday morning. That man, the engineer, the brother, the citizen, died when the bomb went off. He was buried under the rubble of the skyscraper. The man sitting in this dark room was someone new. Someone colder. Someone who would kill for a bottle of water. I heard a noise outside the door. Footsteps in the tunnel. Fast, heavy footsteps. Then voices. Shouting. I grabbed the flashlight and clicked it off. I grabbed the iron bar. I sat in the pitch black, listening to the chaos passing by outside my thin metal door. I didn't breathe. The footsteps faded. I remained in the dark. The first 24 hours were over. The world had ended. The fire had burned the cities. The rain had poisoned the air. But I was still here. I gripped the iron bar tight. Come and get me, I whispered to the darkness. The end of day 1.